So here we are in chapter 18 of the book of Revelation, the judgment of God upon commercial Babylon. Chapter 17, the judgment of God upon religious Babylon, both of which are prophesied in Revelation 14:8, where John is speaking in the prophetic past tense, saying Babylon is fallen and is fallen. Here's the fulfillment of it. And so Revelation 18. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as queen, and am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and bodies and souls of men. The fruit that your soul longed for is gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, who became rich by her, will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city which was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, and shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more. And the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more. And the voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth. For by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints, and of all who were slain on the earth. So it's very serious stuff, this judgment upon commercial Babylon, and there's a severe, straightforward warning to the people of God in verse 4. Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. Do not marry this commercial harlot. Stay as independent as you can from it, because it will turn and destroy you through the plagues that it receives. So come out, and this is a general principle. We are, as believers, to come out of the world system. We live in the world, but we're not of it. We don't value what the world values. We don't love what the world loves. We don't lust after what the world lusts after, because all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not of the Father, but it's of the world. And this world is passing away, along with all of its lusts. But he who does the will of God will abide forever. That's the truth for believers. We're to come out. We're to be different. What we trust in, what we value, what we desire in our lives, we're different. We're to be set apart and different and distinct, so that when we get close to people who don't yet know Jesus, they'll be asking themselves the question, what makes this person so different? How can they act this way? Why is their value system as it is? And if they can't see a difference, then there's probably something wrong with our walk with Christ. The idea of holiness, the idea of sanctification is simply to be separate from the world, not separate from the people in the world. We need to be around the people of the world, and we need to love the people of the world. They're valuable to God. Jesus died for their sins. But instead, separate from the system that is embraced by the world. And here in chapter 18, the judgment upon the commercial system of the world. The merchants are mourning the judgment of this system. The kings are mourning the judgment of this system. Everybody's afraid when God judges this system, and great violence is used to destroy this system, and the result is that there's literally no happiness any longer. Things that we rely upon to keep us sane or above ground in this dark and dreary world. Things like music. Well, all of that's gone. Harpists, musicians, flutists, trumpeters. No sound coming from them anymore. The things that we love in terms of craftsmanship and creativity, gone. The sound of a millstone, gone. No more grinding of wheat. No more farming and wonderful smells and the result that's produced by the farmer's work, gone. Lamps, no more lamps shining in us anymore. You're not going to see marriages because the voice of the bridegroom and bride won't be heard anymore. And the merchants of the world that have been deceived by the sorcery of Mystery Babylon the Great, the commercial side of things, they're not going to be heard anymore either. So, I mean, this is a serious thing, because it's the love of money that Paul said to Timothy is the root of all kinds of evil. And it's so true. It's the love of money. It's the love of things, and the love of money that produces things, and the lust to gain as much as possible. And our world is obsessed and convinced that this economic system is the way to go. It's the wave of the future. Problem is that our leaders oftentimes get sucked up into this. And we've had leaders that have made agreements and trade agreements and contracts and so on and so forth with very ungodly and very unethical and very ruthless leaders for the sake of convenience, for the sake of trade, for the sake of economic advantage. Those days will be over with once commercial Babylon is judged. So there you have the distinction between religious Babylon judged in chapter 17 and commercial Babylon judged in chapter 18. Be careful. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's not money that's the root of all kinds of evil. It's the love of money. We're to be stewards of the money God provides for us and use it for God's purposes. Luke 16, read the parable of the unjust steward. It's a fascinating parable. And here's a man who was unfaithful in carrying out his master's desires, and he was a poor steward, and so he was fired. So what did he do? Well, before he left his job, he went to all of his master's debtors and reduced their debt. And then after he was fired and let go and couldn't work any longer, he would go to them and say, remember what you owed my master? Remember how far I reduced your debt? Well, now you owe me. I need some help. Can you lend me a hand? Can you put me up? Can you provide food for me? These kinds of things. And the master, when he heard about what this unjust steward had done, he commended his former steward for how shrewd he was. He didn't commend him for what he had done. He commended him for how shrewd he was in using his present situation to prepare for his future advantage. He was going to be out of a job, and as long as he still had this position, he was going to use the position to unethically provide for his future. It wasn't the unethical behavior that was rewarded by the master, but it was the shrewdness. And Jesus said, the sons of this age are wiser concerning their own things than the children of light. Make friends to yourselves, Jesus said, by means of the unrighteousness of mammon. And when it fails, they, the friends that you made through the use of your money, the use of your possessions, they will receive you into everlasting habitations. He who is faithful in that which is least is also faithful in that which is much. So we have an entirely different way of looking at money, looking at things, looking at possessions. We're to use them for a kingdom advantage, to win people, to influence people, to bless people, to strengthen people. And if we do that, we will be making friends by use of just things that we own and by use of the money that is in our bank accounts. And making those friends, they will receive us into everlasting habitations. When we get to heaven, we'll see them there. They'll be waiting for us, those that have come to Christ, and they'll say, I know who you are. You don't know who I am, but I know who you are. You're the one that contributed to that fund, or you're the one that offered that asset, and as a result of it, I'm in the kingdom. This is powerful stuff. This is the way we approach our things. We don't love them in and of themselves. We use them. We're a steward over them. And you know what? I'm telling this to myself right now as I speak. Oh, how we need to be God's stewards. God bless you. Have a wonderful week, and see you tomorrow for Revelation chapter 19.